Hey everybody, Deathblade here with another reaction video, actually a little bit of a different one this time. I'm reacting to a review of A Will Eternal by James Tullos. I do not know anything about James Tullos or his channel, but this was brought to my attention, and since I am the translator of the novel, I figured I would give him a reaction video to it. So yes, I did translate it. It's a very, very long Chinese fantasy novel. If you want my opinion or my take on what the novel is about, I'll put a link to a video that I did about it up here. Fair disclosure, I watched about maybe 30-40 seconds of the reaction video before deciding whether or not to react to it, and I noticed quite a bit of factually incorrect stuff within that short time period. So I suspect this video is going to be me nitpicking or quibbling about different things, and so if you don't like that kind of stuff, fair warning. I do not intend for this video to be a diss or a roast or anything like that to James. He looks like a lovely young fellow, so I'm not interested in causing drama or anything like that. And for those of you out there in my channel who are fans of A Will Eternal, if there are things said that are incorrect or opinions that you don't like, please don't go to his channel or to his social media and troll him or say mean things. That might be what the main character of A Will Eternal would do, but we are not going to imitate Bai Xiaochun. Another thing is, this is being recorded after hours, as you can see by the wonky lighting if you're used to my channel. I have both kids at home, a 5-year-old and an 8-month-old, and I think the chances of me getting through this entire reaction video without being interrupted are very low. So if kids burst in, you have fair warning. I may edit that out later. I have some liquid refreshment here. Normally I don't have beer while I'm making videos, but hey, it's after hours for me, so I think that is my right. Okay, so let me pull up the screen here. And so this is James Tullos' channel. Again, you can kind of see the little red bar. I did watch a little bit of it. And again, I'm going to be commenting mostly, I hope, on the factual stuff in this video, not opinions. If people don't like A Will Eternal, or any other novel for that matter, that's their right and they can do that. So let's get started here.
Recommended.
I'm going to go back to the beginning.
Alright, so I just finished reading a bunch of a wuxia web novel called A Will Eternal.
So right off the bat, we have a mistake. A Will Eternal is not a wuxia novel. Granted, that's a very common misconception or mistake that a ton of people make. I am sure if you Google it, there's probably sites or articles or whatever out there calling A Will Eternal wuxia. It is not wuxia, it is xianxia, and they're very different. I know that for people coming into the scene that are new, they're probably very hard to tell apart, but for anybody who has read a few of the novels, they start to become very obvious what the differences are. So just to be clear, A Will Eternal is not a wuxia novel. Incidentally, I do want to point out that you can get pirate versions of a lot of translations and novels just about anywhere. I know a lot of people do that. If at all possible, please do read stuff where it is licensed and official. In that case, it's wuxiaworld.com. I'll put links in the description below. And as a very quick update for people who are waiting for the ebook version to come out on Amazon, we almost have all the covers done. The book is completely edited, and so it should be coming out on Amazon soon. Okay, let's keep going.
So like I said, this is not really a book in the traditional sense. It's a web novel series, which means it was kind of done in the style of like a Wattpad story or a Fiction Press story or something like that.
Okay, well, the Chinese web novel industry has been around for like 15 years. I don't think that's a correct way of wording it, but again, quibbling. It's not as though the author of this novel, who is like a multi-millionaire or whatever in China, it's not as though he was modeling it after Wattpad stories. That's just not correct.
And so it wasn't really divided into a bunch of novels in a series.
Actually, it was. So if you just go to wuxiaworld.com, click on A Will Eternal, you can see how it was divided up into books. We actually redid the books for the ebook version. We actually split it up into 16 books for the ebook version, which has yet to be released. The original grouping was fine, but we wanted the books to be a little bit shorter. We found the best transition points in the plot and then re-divided the book. So for the fans, when it comes out on Amazon, you're going to see there's a lot more books than there were originally.
Now, I did look into it, and it's like 1,300 chapters long. And doing some math, I saw that that would be over 3 million words, which would be like me reading the first 10 Wheel of Time books, which, like, I wasn't going to do that for just this video, so I just read for a while, like 40-ish chapters.
So that's a fair point. It is a series and it is very, very long, and yeah, it's a little bit less than Wheel of Time. The series that the author wrote before this, which I also translated, I Shall Still the Heavens, is a little bit longer. It's something like 1,600 chapters. So I think it's definitely fair to not want to read that entire thing to do a review video. That said, the video is titled A Will Eternal Review, not the first part of A Will Eternal, so I'm curious where this is going.
And then I said, okay, I think that's a good enough spot to really have an idea of what this is like. And plot-wise, it wasn't really a good stopping point, but I don't think there really would be one, unfortunately.
That's wrong. I mean, the story is broken up into distinct sections, and I personally kind of view it as having 3 major acts that go through those 1,300 chapters. And even within those 3 major acts, there are logical plot arc stopping points quite frequently.
Just keep in mind that when I'm reviewing this, I'm not really reviewing stuff that comes in at like the middle or the end of the series. This is, in some ways, this is kind of like just opening thoughts, but at the same time, this section of the series that I read is longer than a lot of books that I have reviewed on here. So I don't know what to make of that. You can make of that whatever you want.
That's a fair enough statement. One thing I do have to say is that somewhere around, I think, chapter 50 is the end of a major part of the first part of the story, and it has a really awesome scene. So if you don't make it to that part, if he didn't make it to that part, it would kind of suck. But I guess maybe he'll talk about it later.
So the plot here is basically that there is this young boy named Bai Xiaochun.
Pretty good.
And he just wants to go off and become a badass. He wants to join this group called the Outer Sect, and he wants to learn how to like do chi condensation and become immortal and stuff like that. It's kind of neat, but at the same time, we never really learn why he wants to do all this.
Okay. So this is really weird because that's like so completely wrong that it almost makes it seem like he didn't read the story, because it mentions over and over and over again that he is scared of dying and he wants to live forever. And the main reason is because his parents died when he was young and he was at their deathbed, and he was so shaken that he decided he wants to live forever. So he doesn't want to be a badass, which is, that's an odd statement. That's literally contrary to his entire character. The entire unique thing about his character, which is a contrast to these novels in general, is that he doesn't want to be a badass. He doesn't care. He doesn't like fighting and killing and stuff like all the other people tend to do. He just wants to survive and live forever and not die.
Out of all the many little issues I have with this book, not knowing exactly why Bai Xiaochun wants to do all this stuff is a bit disappointing. Because I think Bai Xiaochun is a fun character, actually. In fact, he's kind of an idiot, and he's disruptive and a jerk to everyone around him, but the book acknowledges that he's an idiot and he's disruptive and he's a jerk to everyone around him. Because at the very beginning, he leaves his village, and the village just immediately starts celebrating and is still in earshot, and he's like, "You guys know I can still hear you, right?" And they're like, "We don't care. Woo!"
That never happened in the book. He doesn't. The entire joke about it is that he actually pretends that he doesn't hear them, or pretends that there's something else going on. So again, it's really weird. Like, a lot of the stuff that's being described is basically not what happened in the novel. And again, I don't see how you review a book and miss the main motivation of the character. It was established so early on, but
because this is kind of written in like light novel format, which I don't really like, it'll do something like it'll show him learning a new training technique one day, and then it'll just say he did the same thing every day for 3 months, and then at the end he was really good at it. And so it does save a lot of time, admittedly. I think if this was written more like a regular novel as opposed to a light novel, it would go on so much longer than it does. But
I mean, that's a fair statement. And yeah, I mean, when you're dealing with a story that's 1,300 chapters long, as you can imagine, what happens in the first couple dozen chapters is almost like nothing compared to the larger story. So yeah, I think skipping past that kind of stuff is probably a good thing in my opinion.
That said, I don't like the way light novels are written. I never have, and I have yet to find anything that really changes my opinion. And just like with Japanese light novels, this was translated. It was originally written in Mandarin, at least I believe it was Mandarin.
So I actually have a video entitled "Are Chinese Fantasy Novels Written in Mandarin or Cantonese?" Mandarin is a spoken language, basically, and Cantonese is a dialect. So it's written in simplified Chinese characters, but that doesn't really matter because simplified and traditional can be interchanged with a click of a button, basically. What he said about light novels, it makes sense to me. And I think it's cool that he's at least acknowledging he basically doesn't like this style of literature, so that's fair enough.
There's not nearly enough detail on things. Once in a while we'll get something, like we'll get a character description if they're important, but, you know, for action scenes, for descriptions of environments, for descriptions of what people are doing. Dialogue is usually trimmed down. It's difficult for me to form a picture in my head, and some people might like that more, actually. They might like that, oh, okay, I can use my imagination more.
So actually, I totally agree with this. I mean, I wouldn't say totally, but for the most part, I agree with it. One of the things that is lacking in at least the author Argun's novels is he doesn't go into a lot of those details. The funny thing is I have been communicating with the artist as we do cover art, and this is kind of a problem because he's asking me, well, what do these things look like? I don't really have much to give him. In fact, let me see if I can pull up a screenshot real quick. So as you can see, this is a conversation between me and the artist, and yeah, that's fair criticism. That said, if the author did go into those details, you know, what do the clothes look like? What does every character look like? What does every scene look like? It wouldn't be 1,300 chapters. It would be like 2,600 chapters or something like that. So that's not the point of these novels. These novels are supposed to be read quickly. The authors pump out 2 or 3 chapters a day. It's not supposed to be Wheel of Time. It's not supposed to be George R. R. Martin where there's all this complicated detail that paints a picture for you. That's definitely not the point.
You might notice I haven't really been talking about the plot except in very broad strokes, and that's because there isn't much of one. And again, maybe there is more later on, but...
I mean, it's a fair point, especially if you only read a couple dozen chapters, because the plot itself unfolds slowly. Like I mentioned, there's a 3-act structure, roughly speaking, that covers the entire series. And then the first act basically has, in my opinion, also 3 smaller, minor overarching acts, I guess you could say. I think it's kind of a fair criticism, but again, saying that there's no plot, and I think he's acknowledging this, which is fine. Kind of like saying, oh, I don't really know what the plot of A Wheel of Time is, but I only read the first, half of Eye of the World. I mean, okay.
We get this one guy who's like really hard-headed and he's not the smartest, but he's super determined, and Bai Xiaochun is extremely determined. Like that's the main way he gets so good at all of these skills that he keeps learning, is because he's willing to undergo horrible pain and discomfort for it, which is also kind of funny. Like, on one hand, it is inspiring, because I'm like, oh wow, I respect this kid for going this far, but he is still, again, like I said earlier, he's kind of an asshole, and so it's funny to watch him suffer. But...
That is a fair statement, and it is true that he is set up as a character that many people in the setting dislike, but that is a little bit of a over-characterization. It's not quite true, because he actually does have friends. He has people... Even in the first 40 chapters, like Big Fatty Zhang and Ho Xiaomei, and Ho Xiaomei's brother, whose name I already forgot, and his mentor. So he actually is likable in some ways. And one of the key things about his character that you come to see over the course of the entire series is that he's extremely loyal, and he will do almost anything for his friends.
Okay, I just checked. It was around 95,000 words is what I read. Basically, in that whole chunk, until you get to around 30 chapters in, there's really not that much action or anything, and because we don't really know why Bai Xiaochun is going to all this trouble, even if we're amused by his actions, we don't really feel that much for him.
I do think that's a valid criticism. That said, it's something that's common, I think, within the genre, because the authors of these novels, especially ones like Argun, he's an established author with a huge fan base. He doesn't need to establish those things in the first couple chapters. He has a huge following, and so he has a lot more room to kind of play around with things. And as I mentioned before, this novel goes against a lot of the common genre tropes. And so, yeah, it's definitely not as action-packed as a lot of the novels that are like it tend to be.
I do want to bring up that it feels distinctly Chinese, and I'm not quite sure how to describe what I mean by that.
I'm not going to I'll listen to what he's going to say after this, but I think that's a good thing. It's a Chinese novel by a Chinese author, so I think it should feel distinctly Chinese, but I wonder what he means by distinctly Chinese. Okay, so I was hoping there would be a more complicated explanation, and I'm going to cut that in editing. Basically, he repeated the same thing before, and again, cool. He identified that, and I think that's a cool thing.
But it is a little different, and, I haven't really read wuxia before, and while I don't like light novels all that much, I haven't read all that many of them either, so I enjoyed this story, I did. Like, it's a very good turn your brain off and just get to work sort of thing. So, recommendation, I think if you're someone who likes light novels, then you'd probably like this. If you're someone who likes light novels and shonen manga, then you definitely like this. If not, I don't really know if this would appeal to you.
I actually would agree with that. And one of the things about A Will Eternal is, like I've said before, it's kind of like a quasi-parody. It's not a beginner novel for this genre. So I totally agree. If this is your first step into the translated Chinese web novel scene, I wouldn't recommend A Will Eternal. I like it. I think it's great. I think it's hilarious. I think there actually is a lot more to discover when you get deeper in and kind of start digging into the meat of the novel. But yeah, it's not the perfect one to start out with. There are other ones, such as Coiling Dragon is one of the ones that kind of hooks a lot of people. My other novel by the same author, I Shall Sail the Heavens, is a little bit more down the beaten path in terms of what people are used to, and that's out on Amazon, by the way. So actually, I kind of agree with this assessment. He basically says it's cool, but maybe not for everybody.
I mean, you can check it out, and if you get 2 or 3 chapters in and you're not feeling it, you're probably not going to enjoy it, I'll say that much. But I don't regret spending my time on this.
So my summary reaction to the whole video is, I mean, there are some factually incorrect things that were said, especially at the beginning, and maybe some of them were opinion, his opinion versus my opinion. Overall, I think this is not that bad of a review. So I was worried that it was going to be somebody coming in that had no idea what the genre was about or whatever and was just kind of bashing it. But I think he actually did not bad of a take for somebody who is not used to it. I'd like to wrap up by saying to James, if he watches this, hey, if you like the first 40 chapters, I really think you should continue reading it. There is a lot more to come. There are ups and downs, and there is a larger story. Actually, pretty much the entire 1,300 chapters is a major story arc. There's a lot of stuff going on that you don't find out about for dozens, hundreds of chapters, and there's some really cool stuff to come. And now that we're at the end of the video, if you're still watching, my channel is still demonetized, so if you'd like to support me, like, subscribe, and check out the links below in the description to A Will Eternal and also my original novel series. The series is called The 9 Heavens and 10 Earths, and the first book is The Heretic Peacekeeper. That's it for this video. I will see you next time. Gautsala.